What sort of powers come with being human? I'm Mike Mason. This is the Immortal Combat Podcast. The Immortal Combat Podcast is the podcast arm of Viri Christi. Viri Christi is a Catholic lay apostolate devoted to help young men attain the full stature of Christ by growing strong in mind, body, and spirit. If you'd like to learn more about our work, you can check us out online at virichristi.com. All right, fellas, this is the Intro to Moral Theology, episode 6. Okay, in this episode, we're going to answer the question, what powers come with being human? Okay, you heard the old Spider-Man thing, with great power comes great responsibility. As you're going to discover, human beings have a lot of power, which means that's going to come with a lot of responsibility, which we'll talk about in this this investigation of the moral life. All right, last week we talked about what a man is. We talked about what it means to be made in God's image, and then some just practical implications of that, right? So we said man has a soul and a body. He has an intellect and a will and stuff like that. We talked about the fact that we're made in the image of God naturally, supernaturally, which is called the image of grace, and then we'll be in God's image in a new way when we get to heaven, God willing that we make it, okay? This week, we're going to talk about 4 aspects of the human person that comes with the fact that we have a body and a soul. So what we're going to unpack is what sort of powers and abilities and appetites and such come with us being human, because that'll help us understand how to become the men God wants us to be. So if God's trying to perfect us or make us better or turn us into men he wants us to be, we have to have a clear understanding of what we are so we can understand what he's doing, how we can cooperate with it, and make some progress, okay? So let's start with a short review. Last week we said man is a soul-body composite. So we have a soul and we have a body. Now, because we have a body, that's something we have in common with other creatures like animals, okay? What comes with having a body is that we have appetites, desires, and emotions, okay? So just because we have a body, we have desires for things like food, drink, and sex, okay? Because we have a body, we feel emotions of pain and hurt and joy and stuff like that. What comes with having a body are these appetites and these emotions that are going to have to be cultivated, okay? So we don't let them just run crazy. They're going to have to be cultivated, which we'll get into a little bit later, all right? What comes with us having a soul? Because we have a soul, we are also rational, which means we have an intellect that can think about things and a will that can choose them, all right? When you think about all the stuff that God created, okay, when you kind of reflect upon this, you can kind of lay out everything in a few broad categories. Of all the things God created, some of the stuff he created is not alive, right? That's stuff like rocks and water and stuff like that. Like there's unliving things. Then you have stuff God created like plants, okay? What can plants do? They can take in nourishment, right? They can take in water, stuff, photosynthesis, stuff like that. They can grow and they can reproduce, all right? Then above them, you have animals. Animals, just like plants, can take in nourishment, grow, and reproduce. But animals have an ability to interact with the world around them in a more profound way, okay? Because they have senses, right? They can see and touch, taste, and smell. And then their brains can think about the objects in front of them. That's why you can train animals to do things, right? Because they can make associations and stuff like that. So animals are a little bit, have more power than the plants do. We are above the animals. Okay, so just like plants and animals, we have the ability to take in nourishment, eat, stuff like that, drink water, grow and reproduce. Just like animals, we have the ability we have senses, right? We can see, touch, taste, smell certain things. We also have the ability to think about the particular things that are right in front of us, to reflect upon them, and animals can do that in a very similar way. But what makes us unique is we have a rational soul, okay? And our rational soul is our ability to think abstractly. And what I mean by that is we have an ability for like complex language, like the stuff you guys that just comes natural to us, like talking about things like what is justice and what's a good life and what's moral theology. We also have ability because we're rational to do things like mathematics, right, and science and those sort of things. So we're above them. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this is we have to understand kind of where we are in the created order, so we understand what perfects us. So if you think that morality is nothing more than like training a dog, like, oh yeah, training a human being to be moral is just like training a dog. Well, that doesn't make any sense because we have powers that dogs don't have, okay? So we have to have a clear eye of what kind of powers we have so that we know how to train us, okay? Now, as I said before, right, We have we have two basic powers and two appetites. Okay, so we have the power of intellect, which we talked about, and we have the power of will, which is to choose. The two basic appetites we have are our appetite for pleasurable goods and our appetite for difficult goods. These four all have to be perfected. So let's start with the lowest first, our appetites for pleasurable goods. Because we have bodies, we have appetites for things like food, drink, and sex. Now, a good human being does not let those things run wild. So your appetite for food, if you let that run wild, you just eat when you want, how you want, where you want, with no concern for health, you're going to ruin yourself. Okay. Same thing's true with drink. If you're drinking Mountain Dews all day long, like 6 or 7 of them, it's going to make you sick. Same thing with sex. People that run around and have sex promiscuously, you can get sick from doing stuff like that. Okay. It's not good for you. So our appetite for things like food, drink, and sex have to be tempered. Okay. Doesn't mean extinguished, not giving away, but it has to be controlled. That is a virtue called temperance. So the kind of men God wants us to be is temperate men, which means we are men who have control over our desires for pleasure. Got it? What's above that? We don't always have desires for things that are pleasurable. We also have desires for things that are difficult, like lifting weights and running a mile in less than 7 minutes, or graduating from high school, or name it, right? Studying theology together on this podcast. That desire, we have a desire to do hard stuff. Okay. But that also needs to be tempered, because if you do the hard things like a crazy person, okay, you can mess your life up a whole bunch. Or you can be like a total coward on the other side, never do anything difficult. What you need is to perfect your desire to do difficult things by acquiring what's called fortitude or courage. This is a virtue that helps you to do difficult things willingly, so that you can stretch yourself and become the man you want to be. So not only does your appetite for pleasurable things have to be disciplined and with temperance, your desire for difficult things needs to be disciplined through fortitude. And a lot of ways we do both of these guys is things like lift weights, things like run, things like watch our diet, things like make ourselves do our homework, stuff like that. Put your cell phone down at night and go to bed. Those are ways that you develop fortitude and temperance. Okay, a lot of stuff you guys do all the time. Now, the third thing I want to address is your will. Now, what your will is, it's called a rational appetite. What I mean by that is a will wants what is good. Okay, a will wants things that are goods that are difficult, pleasurable. It doesn't care. The will is directed towards the good. Now, the will, if it gets out of control, it's just going to have like a me type of direction. So when your will's out of control, the only thing you care about is you. You don't care about anyone else. Well, that's not a good way to live. So the will, though you want goods for yourself, which is not bad, you have to take into consideration other people and God. And so your will has to be trained to not be selfish, but to give other people and God what they're due. That's a virtue called justice. Okay. So there's 4 cardinal virtues. The 3 of them, temperance, fortitude, and justice, perfect our desire for pleasurable goods, difficult goods, and perfect our will. What about our intellect? Your intellect also needs to be perfected. You need to perfect your intellect by growing in wisdom, right? Knowledge and understanding. So you have to learn to think well about God and the world around you and things like that. And you'll do that in school. Maybe this podcast is helping you do that a little bit. That's a perfection of the intellect. Your intellect also has to be perfected by learning to do things, practical stuff, like build stuff. Okay. Do art or build a table, or, I don't know, wire your house or something. You also need to learn to make good decisions morally. That's called prudence. So the intellect needs to be perfected in a lot of ways too, which is why we spend so much time sending you guys to school and such. Okay. So if you guys notice, to kind of bring us to a conclusion here, we have 2 powers that come with what we are. We have the power of intellect and will, the power to think and choose, that are perfected by prudence and justice. Our appetites, we have an appetite for pleasurable goods and difficult goods. Those are perfected by temperance and fortitude. So what I want you to see is that what the moral life's about is it's about become the men God wants us to be by acquiring virtues that perfect the powers that we have. Okay, that's what it's about. And when we commit ourselves to this, we become more free and more happy as we perfect it. That's the idea. All right, we are butting up against the end of our time, but we covered a lot of good stuff there. We will revisit these topics a ton in the future. So if you didn't get all of it down now, re-listen to it. Don't have time to re-listen to it. We'll keep revisiting stuff in the future. But look forward to talking to you guys next week. And I hope you guys have a blessed week.